From the Zimmerman Symphony Center in Canton, Ohio, this is Orchestrating Change. I'm Matthew Jenkins Yarashevitz, Associate Conductor of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
And I'm Rachel Hegemeyer, Manager of Education and Community Engagement.
Welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining us.
This podcast will navigate the issues that exist in the field of classical music and the world at large. We invite you to listen with open ears as our guests share their experience as underrepresented professionals in the music industry.
Our guest today is Ryan Walks, Manager of the Talent Development Program at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, which has provided training and career development to young classical musicians in the Black and Latino communities for over 25 years. Prior to entering the world of arts administration, he was trained as a trumpet player and music educator, receiving all of his degrees from historically Black universities. Ryan Walks, welcome to Orchestrating Change.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My very first podcast.
Yay. Well, I feel like we've had quite a few people. It's their first podcast.
Absolutely.
Which is fun. I like that a lot. Well, Ryan, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do?
Sure. So as you guys just said, I currently work with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra as the manager of the Talent Development Program. But prior to coming over here, I was a young aspiring music student originally from Southern California, growing up in the Los Angeles area where obviously they have a huge music scene in various different genres. My family has a musical background, so I was able to do the normal thing that everybody else does and start off with piano lessons. And then there was a church performance that my grandfather took me to where I actually saw a full-on classical orchestra. And then from then on, I just really fell in love with instrumental music. And I was like, I want to learn all those instruments and do what those people do. But I gravitated towards the brass. So as through elementary, middle school, and high school, I was into brass and band music for the most part. So we ended up moving from Georgia to California. This is actually my second time being in Georgia. The first time I moved, getting ready to go into high school, and I was in Clayton County, Georgia, which is just south of the city of Atlanta. And so I finished off high school there, and that's how I was able to get more accustomed to the historical Black college and university side, because they have huge marching band programs. I was doing marching band in high school on trumpet, of course. And so I actually auditioned for them on top of some other schools across the country. And then I ended up getting more scholarship at that time from Bethune-Cookman University. So we moved back to California, but I kind of segued on down to Florida for college and just jumped back and forth from the east to the west coast. And I've literally been doing that for since 2007, just whether flying home from college or in grad school or just, doing work. So it's just been like hopscotching back and forth between both coasts. And then I was permanently working in California, got accustomed to the Musicians Union in Los Angeles, and was doing some instrumental music with their union symphony orchestra. So if you look on the roster, they may still have me listed on both trumpet and flute, which I think is cool. But then some people are like, oh, you're not as serious as you should be. But yeah, I'd like to say I love instrumental music, and it's one of my hobbies. But I actually ended up relocating back to Georgia in 2017 and was able to get accustomed to the Woodruff Arts Center, the big powerhouse of music and art in the South. And so I was able to, intern and volunteer some time with the ASO, which was a really mind-blowing experience, because it was actually my first position in the arts field and orchestral field from actually what I studied in college. So it was like a great, honor and humbling experience. And I've been working with them ever since, and, just enjoying every moment of it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's so fun. Yeah.
So you alluded to the fact that you come from a musical family. Tell us a little bit more about the family members who are musical or were musical, and how music factored into your home life when you were a child.
So my family is originally from a country called Guyana in South America, and they used to be a former British colony. So the former name is British Guyana, and they're the only English-speaking country on the entire continent. So they relocated and came here. And so, of course, with that cultural ties to England is a big tie to the classical music side. So my grandfather actually became an ordained minister in the Presbyterian church. And that's how I was able to get it. And he was an organ player, an organist. So that's one of the ways I was able to get accustomed to music. My mom and some of my aunts and uncles trained on piano. And some of my relatives, they also sang and did vocal works and actually formed their own groups within the church as well. And so, but like I said before, I really got into the instrumental side of it. And once I started off with taking piano lessons with one of my grandparents' friends, Mr. Carrington, and he gave me piano lessons. I actually hated it at the time. And if I could go back in time, I would literally slap myself in the face and be like, stay and do this. It will pay off so much for you in the future. But I hated it at the time. And then as I got a few years older, my family was able to get me to into the, like I said, the instrumental side. So I was able to look at the trumpet and some of the other instruments, and I was like, I want to do this. But yeah, that's how we kind of got started with my influence in music from my family.
Yeah. And you mentioned you chose, you gravitated towards brass instruments eventually, and you chose trumpet. And then so I think you said this, you were looking at so you went to Bethune-Cookman University for your bachelor's, and then Norfolk State for your master's, both of which are HBCUs, or historically black colleges and universities. Why did you mentioned the marching bands, which I would love to talk about, because the marching bands of HBCUs are amazing and very, very cool. So I'd love to hear a little bit about why you ended up choosing those institutions for your education. And then if you also want to talk a little bit about the marching band, because I'm very interested in that.
Well, that's primarily the reason why I ended up at those institutions, because like you just mentioned, marching band, the music scene for a lot of historical black colleges is, symphonic band music, marching band, and then outside of that is the choir and choral works. And so being in Atlanta at the time, a lot of the music educators who are currently teaching marching bands are alums of these same historical black colleges. So Bethune-Cookman, Florida A&M, Morehouse, Howard, Tennessee State, all of them. So they come and, they teach all these schools in the Metro Atlanta. So there's already a big significance and a tie to historical black colleges, especially in the Atlanta area, just based off of that, because it's like, you're being taught by a product of an HBCU. So, and the band directors at these colleges will actually come to schools like my high school, Morrow High School in Clayton County, and as part of their recruitment efforts to come and audition kids, offer them scholarship money, and help them get to the college level. So that was how I ended up being able to afford going to Bethune-Cookman. My number one choice was always going back to California and going to like the University of Southern California. That was like my dream school. And that actually might be if I, am brave enough to go for my doctorate, but we'll see in the future. But it just made more sense at the time to just go ahead and select Bethune-Cookman based on what I was afforded as a trumpet player in high school. And so I was doing marching band in high school, absolutely loved it. And then I got to the college level, and then it became very serious. It was like more like a business aspect of marching band. It was like a big part. So like if you were majoring in music and you were doing marching band in college, you were living in the music building, like some of these students at conservatories will do when they're trying to prepare for recitals. It's like you wake up, you go to your other classes. Some of them, your music classes are always going to be in the music building. You go eat lunch, you go back and you stay in marching band for like the evening to, sometimes late at night, depending on how long practice goes. So it was a really big eye-opening experience. We got to travel. I got to go to many different states on the East Coast just because of, especially my freshman year, we had a lot of away games. So we were going all the way up to actually my grad school. We did a game, drove all the way from Daytona Beach, Florida to Norfolk, Virginia in the winter. And, just went and did a Battle of the Bands there, a game in the Battle of the Bands there, and went all across Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. So we were on tour. on top of going to Florida, we were able to do some halftime shows for major football teams like Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We did the Miami Dolphins halftime when I was there, and one more I'm forgetting. But it's really like a powerhouse and a big integral part of what people think of when they, envision historical Black colleges and universities. So it was great to, have that experience as well, and just enjoy it off of what I was doing in high school.
Wow. Yeah, that's
And
really cool.
did you march at Norfolk State when you were getting your master's degree as well?
Absolutely not. The band there is great, but I was doing my dissertation at the time. And like I said, it's a lot of time and energy and effort. So I did not want to set myself up by trying to do a 70-page paper and also spend my evenings marching for halftime games. So I just had to, make the best decision for timing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And wait, and
totally
what?
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely not. And what are your degrees in?
So my bachelor's degree is in trumpet performance from Bethune-Cookman, or music performance, a Bachelor of Arts in Music Performance, and then my master's is a master's degree in music education.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Very, very cool. That's what I thought. I was just, very cool.
So you majored in music performance undergrad as a trumpet player. I'll just ask straight up, is there orchestra at Bethune-Cookman? And in general, orchestra or not, what are the classical performing opportunities at both Bethune-Cookman and Norfolk State?
So both of these colleges will, especially for whatever instrument you're majoring on, especially on the band side, so flute, clarinet, trumpet, trombone, percussion, what have you, you're still going through and studying the standard repertoire, solo repertoire for those instruments, like you would as a conservatory or a school of music. So I was still tackling, the Haydn trumpet concerto, polishing that, among other things, with my teachers at Bethune-Cookman. At that time, we didn't have like a string program. So the main focus was, like I said, with, band instruments. So that's how you got your classical training, by going through the standard repertoire for those solo instruments. And then also for the ensembles, you had concert band and symphonic band. I think it maybe they may have expounded it at this point, since I graduated in 2012. But so it was more, like I said, symphonic band focused at that point. So, but you were still having to do a lot of the same requirements, similar to what, I'm sure we'll get into when we talk about the talent development program, is you have your private lessons, going through that same repertoire. You're still going through the classical training structure. They're all, of course, being historical Black colleges, there are also opportunities to do more genres such as jazz and more popular music that you can do as well. But for performance focused, the ensemble and solo repertoire that you go through are, like I said, mostly, at that time for me, was mostly band oriented. Right. So of course you had symphonic works that may have been transposed for bands that may have had strings, but you write them for a band ensemble, just because we didn't have a string program at that time.
Absolutely.
Right.
I've played a number of those myself, having grown up as a saxophone player, playing in wind ensemble. I've played a number of orchestral, as we call them, bandistrations, as opposed to orchestrations of famous pieces of orchestral music. Yeah. So looking back at some of your colleagues who were with you at Bethune-Cookman, are any of them currently playing in major symphony orchestras around the country?
So and you got to forgive me because I am horrible with keeping up with people. So I can't confirm or deny, because I don't want to say yes or no, because some of them actually might be there. I know a lot of our my colleagues that were in the vocal training program have gone on and toured around the world, in Europe and Asia, and have done really great things for their performance level since graduating Cookman. One of them obviously was not in my class for music performance, but I think she was a year ahead of me. But a lot of my colleagues I'm actually seeing here, and like I said at the beginning, are actually teaching in the school districts across Atlanta and working with students, because at that time when I was there, most of the students majoring in music wanted to go into music education. So, and music technology. So I was one of the few that wanted to go into performance and try and go that route. So there weren't a whole lot of us specifically performance. Not to say that some of the education majors weren't at a level where they could do performance, but they came to the school already knowing that they wanted to go and teach and go into the education programs and create their own marching bands or build up marching bands as well. So like I said, but for the colleagues that I did talk to, I know a lot of them do a lot of had a lot of performance opportunities as well, but like I said, I have not kept up with some of them.
This is now a call to all of the people who went to college with Ryan.
Right, there are some. I'm pretty sure there are some orchestras across the South where if I went through their roster, I might say like, oh, I went to college with that guy. So
yeah. So why, you talked a little bit about why you ended up there. Looking back on the experience at both institutions, what do you think you got from going to a historically Black college that you wouldn't have gotten if you had been at more traditional conservatory setting, or even just a more traditional or a more mainstream college in America?
One thing I was able to get at that time was, one, I was able to perform with a lot of people who looked like me, from similar backgrounds, and we had that we were able to afford those connections. Yes.
Ryan, hold on a second. So our internet just shorted out. You froze for a second. Just start from the top of this answer. We'll edit it together.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah, we're good.
Now.
It froze for a second. So I think we
lost you for about 7 seconds.
Yeah, so
we're good now.
Yeah, I think you said like I got to perform with a lot of people who looked like me. That was I think if you start there again, we'll be good to go.
Right. So the experience I was able to get from these two institutions was that I was able to be in music programs and perform with a lot of people that looked like me and came from similar backgrounds. So we already had that cultural connection there. Another thing that I got that I don't think a lot of kids at conservatories at that time were getting, I don't want to misspeak, was that I was really able to see more music repertoire by composers and musicians of color. So I got more acquainted with Adolphus Hailstork, William Grant Steele, Florence Price, across the board on both instrumental and vocal music. And so there was a highlight of being able to, incorporate that into your weekly recitals that we have in our music department. So it was really a great experience to know that, even though this institution may not have been created for people who look like me, there was still significant representation, albeit maybe small, but you could still find it as I was going through my studies.
Right.
Ryan, remind me, I all three of the composers that you just mentioned have become near and dear to my heart during the pandemic, and I just can't wait to, when we get out of all of this, to start conducting their music. If I remember, I believe Hailstork is a professor or was a professor at Norfolk State. Is that true?
I believe so, yes. One of my colleagues who is actually here in Atlanta teaching at one of the high schools was able to do some research on him, and I believe so as well. I'm sorry, my mind is blanking, but I think you're right.
Yeah, no, and their music is so wonderful. I'm curious, did you play any band arrangements of any of either of those three composers' major symphonic works at any point?
We did do some works by Steele when I was there, and actually as part of my undergrad dissertation, I highlighted Steele and some of the works that we did from him that were arranged for band at the time. So like I said, it was really great to have that going forward. And then of course he was, had a residency with leading the LA Philharmonic back in his day, which I thought was great because that's where I'm from. So he quickly became like one of my favorites to go toward and get his music on my playlist.
Yeah. We were fortunate enough with our youth symphony this past year, even though we were doing things virtually until very recently. In the fall, they put together completely remotely William Grant Steele's Poem for Orchestra. which I think it was a lot of fun to put together, and it came together really, really nicely. But I think that was one of the first times a lot of those students had been exposed to his work. So it was really fun to be able to do that.
And sadly, none of our students in our advanced orchestra are from the African American community, but I at least hope that the experience of playing this has opened their eyes the way our eyes were opened during the pandemic to this music that we just had not really thought about before. It wasn't, you and I are the exact same age. We both graduated college in 2012, and it was not part of the curriculum. Playing these pieces or even studying these pieces, not part of the curriculum as an undergraduate or when I got my conducting degree in the mid 2010s, it just wasn't a part of the conversation. And I think, as horrible as the pandemic was for all of us, the fact that this music is now getting the attention it deserves is one of the few gems that has come out of this pandemic for the classical music profession, but it's an important one.
Right. And well, I mean, and as someone who's graduated more recently than both of you, it still really wasn't in the curriculum when I was at a conservatory. I'm trying to think back to music history and think about but it was so much focus on, I don't remember learning about these people.
No,
so even as recent as a few years ago, it wasn't in the curriculum. So I'm curious, because you've made the transition now into more administrative work, and you did your master's on education. So I'd love to know kind of your thought process and what your goal was maybe when you first entered your undergrad, and how that has morphed and shifted, and kind of what you see for yourself. Because I'm someone who got degrees in arts administration and performance, and I think both are very important. I love both, but I'd love to know where your brain is at with all of, both of your degrees and where you are at now.
Well, when I originally, I think even when I was in 8th grade, like I said, when I first saw a full-on symphonic orchestra playing music, I was like, that's what I wanted to do. Then I got older and I was like, this is really hard. And then I got even older and I was like, there are a lot more people who are really talented and are better than me. So I was like, some of the ensembles that I was privileged to play in, I was like, this is really great and I really like doing this. But I kind of transitioned to education because I was like, okay, well, let me see what this is like. I still was doing performing, but I was like, let me just, see how many other aspects of music that I can, get accustomed to. And a part of me still, there's like a part of me that's like, every time I pick up my trumpet, I'm like, okay, I want to go audition for, the Seattle Symphony or whatever. But I ended up changing direction to arts administration, especially because I was like, I don't think I can handle teaching. I was like, I can barely manage myself, let alone a whole classroom. So I was like, let me go and see what else is out there. So when I was able to go and be part of the musicians union out there, and I was able to go to the building and, connect with a lot of people, that's where I started getting the ideas of arts administration. So when I was able to when I actually moved to Atlanta, I looked online and just saw, what opportunities were available at the time. And there were some good performance opportunities as well, but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know, with my background going, I was like, maybe not. But then I also saw some arts admin programs that I was interested in. So I applied for them, and I was able to connect with a lot of people through that, where I was able to jump in and just say, hey, I'm interested in, seeing how you guys work with an actual orchestral organization, which is how I got accustomed to acquainted with the Atlanta Symphony. And so once I started doing that, I was like, okay, yeah, I think arts administration is the way I'd like to go for now. But a big part of me still looks at performance, trumpet, music, trumpet repertoire, new trumpet repertoire. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can take out the horn and attempt this piece. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't, but that's kind of how I did my transition. Like the biggest was like my colleagues in college, I was like, I don't think I can handle teaching.
I think that's so funny that you say, you're like, I can barely manage myself, let alone other people. And now you're literally a manager of a bunch of people. And I just.
Such is life, right?
the irony of how arts administration just takes what you're thinking. It's like, never mind, you're doing this instead.
Exactly.
I find that's really interesting. So you joined Atlanta Symphony 2017.
And I would just want to jump in here really quickly. I guess you moved to Atlanta, but not for a job at the Atlanta Symphony.
Yeah.
I guess you wanted to live in Atlanta, and then the Atlanta Symphony came after that.
So it's actually interesting. I was living in Los Angeles County at the time, and I was actually renting a place. And so the landlord decided that they were going to sell the place and move to Arizona. So at that time, and it's weird because I was actually working part-time in property management. So I kind of had the insight. I was like, this is in the middle of summer. It's prime season. It's already an expensive market, so I'm not going to be able to find anywhere, affordable in the short amount of time that I had. So I ended up just, a lot of my family had relocated out here. So I ended up coming and staying with family then, and just the original plan was, find something here, get myself back up, and then probably go back out there and start doing, music again or what I could. But then I ended up staying out that way. And then that's how a lot of things started coming forward with, going into downtown and midtown and being acquainted with certain people in the arts arts and music field. And that's how I was able to brush elbows with somebody at the ASO and then end up meeting them. And so that's how that came to be. But yeah, you're right. I originally did not come here specifically thinking that I was going to be working with the ASO at the time.
Right. So how long were you in Atlanta before? Because 2017 is when you started development and working and doing a little bit in the development department. How long was it before you started working with the ASO? I
got to Atlanta the summer of June, and June is a key month. But since I've been back, because it's been it's been the month where a lot of things have happened for me.
Right.
But I got here in June of 2017, and I want to say maybe late September is when I actually was able to meet and get an interview with one of the staff at the time in development. Her name is Brenda Turner. She's actually gone on to continue her professional performance training in Europe. So she's in Germany and Italy right now, but I actually was able to meet with her, and she brought me on, and I was like, I'm just looking for some experience in this type of work. And, however you guys can fit me into helping, I'm definitely, available, because like I said, I'm not doing anything at the moment, but trying to survive. So whenever you need me, I can be available. So I actually started working with them, mostly with Brenda and the current staff person in development, William Keene. And I just was there every Tuesday and Thursday. So I would go in the mornings, and I would help them, with preparation for some of our donor dinners in the Robert Shaw Room. And so I would help organize things for that, and also do, I told them no task is too tedious. I can sit there and go through like a million, files to check off if you guys need to make sure everything is ready for what you guys need. But helping with the Robert Shaw Room dinners, helping with the announcements and communication to all the patrons and symphony donors, and making sure that those get mailed out properly as well. And just, doing a lot of setup in preparation for ASO concerts as well. So it was really great, be in the building and actually sit at a cubicle and, feel like you're actually going to work, even though if it was only 2 days, it, kept focused. So, Brenda was like, you can use this, you can call this an internship on your resume, volunteer, it's fine. I was like, no sweat. I'm just happy for the opportunity. So.
That is music to a development person's ears. There's no task too tedious.
Right.
That is, they were probably, great.
Now knowing what development is, I was like, oh yeah. That's a lot.
So at what point did you transition to full-time at the Atlanta Symphony?
So from that point, I was able to meet a lot of staff in other departments. And so I came across a lady who became my mentor pretty much. Her name is Adrienne Thompson, and she was the manager of the talent development program at that time. Really, really smart, hands down, knows how to handle situations in a calm manner, just knows, if anything comes up, she knows how to handle it. So I admired that a lot. But we actually were doing a mailing prep for an event for the symphony. And so she was able to help us, and that's actually how we got introduced. And so I just told her, I was like, you know, I'm originally from Southern California. I just moved out to Georgia. So I'm really into classical music. And right now I'm really interested in seeing how, you know, a major orchestra works behind the scenes and on stage. And so that's how we got acquainted. I remember it's funny because we actually had a fire drill, and later on, like a few weeks later. And so I was talking with her then, and she was like, are you still looking for a job? And I was like, yeah. She was like, part-time or full-time? And I was like, anytime. And so she was like, well, you should apply for my job. And so she started telling me about, you know, more about the talent development program and how they were coming up on their 25th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And so they were looking for somebody to help bring on as a part-time coordinator to help facilitate, you know, because it was a lot. For the 25th anniversary, there's a lot that was being planned for that year. So I sent her my resume, let her know I was interested, went online, did the application, and told her that I had submitted it, and I just, you know, was still going and doing development and just waited to hear back from, you know, when I would meet with HR. I ended up having my interview with HR, and I thought I bombed that interview horribly. I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But I met with them first, and then I met with her and did an interview with her afterwards. And then I kind of got my bearings when I was talking with her and giving her my experiences. So after that, June of 2018 came around. That's when they called me and told me that if I was interested, then they would like to bring me on for the position as the assistant coordinator for the 25th anniversary. So it was a part-time temporary job at that time. And that's how I ended up actually being employed through the Atlanta Symphony. Fast forward to barely a year later, she actually got hired to go start a pathway program up in the Chicago area where she's originally from, called Chicago Musical Pathways. So right before our big concert where we had some of our alums come and perform and solo with the Atlanta Symphony, right after that, she went on to go start that position. So she was, you know, prepping me. She was like, you know, if this is something that you really want to do, I think you'd be great for it. And you should consider, you know, just being the manager for the time being. So I was like, you know, I just kind of threw it out there. I knew it was a risk. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I was like, you know, I'll go ahead and put my hand in for the manager. So I actually became the interim manager, I want to say just around June of that year, and, you know, auditioned for the full-time manager position. I know there were a lot of, you know, good candidates for that as well. But June of 2019 comes around, and I come back, and they were like, you know, we'd like you to, if you want to, we would like you to go ahead and, you know, assist step in as full-time manager for the TDP program. So that's kind of how my journey has been with the Atlanta Symphony since coming in 2017. So it's been fast, but, you know, really, really fulfilling and humbling.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you weren't
June.
kidding, June, exactly.
I was like, what is happening this June? You got any big plans?
Well, it'll be my anniversary, of course, but
Yeah.
We'll see. Definitely some vacation time. So.
There you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So, okay, let's now get into the nitty gritty a bit about the talent development program. It's been going on incredibly.
Yeah.
It's been going on for over 25 years now. Tell us sort of about the history and how it all got started.
So this was started as a civil rights initiative in the classical field through Atlanta. Our program's founder, Mrs. Zira G. Hill, who is the wife of civil rights activist Jesse Hill, was a big supporter of the arts, and one of our board members of the Atlanta Symphony. And so she was regularly attending concerts, and she and some of our co-founders, which include Miss Mary Grambling, saw that there was a need to kind of help bridge the gap between the music that was taking place in Atlanta Symphony Hall to reflect the wider community of who was in the audience and what actually made up the city of Atlanta at the time. Because, you know, she was, you know, I'm sure at that time was probably one of the few people of color actually in Symphony Hall enjoying the music. And so they started to create these initiatives by one, bringing it to the Atlanta Symphony, saying, you know, we need to have more interaction with our community to come in and enjoy the great music that's happening in this hall. So they were able to work with a lot, with the Atlanta Symphony Associates as a really strong foundation with them, but also representatives of color in the Black education field, music field, arts field, business leaders across the community to help provide funding and support that would eventually give kids within the Atlanta public school system the training and resources they need to be able to become successful musicians. And by doing so, having their family and their communities come and actually see the product of that in Symphony Hall. So this was under works in the late 80s. And by 1993, they were able to have their first inaugural class of 10 students that was actually coming through this program. And by that point, the program was actually helping them prepare for Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra auditions, so there could be more representation within that orchestra as well, which is still a primary goal for us today. And just to really just bring people of color into the classical music side, because whether TDP existed or not, I'd like to think that there was interest in classical music from people who look like me. And so this was just one way to help get the communication and relationships there, so they could come to a space and feel comfortable enjoying music like we do in many other genres and forms.
Right. So can you, in today's form and what it looks like now a little bit, who are these students? How old are they? Like I guess is this a program that's, you know, from 4 to high school, or is it like gauged at a certain age group? And, you know, what are these students getting from this program that is, you know, different than if they were just taking lessons out in the community?
Right. So we serve within our program rising 5th grade all the way up to 12th grade. So if you come in as a 5th grader and you fulfill all the requirements each year, you stay with us until you graduate high school.
Wow.
For the audition process, we take rising 5th grade up to rising 10th grade. We've made exceptions for certain 11th and 12th graders, but that comes directly from musicians in the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. Simply because one of our main focus is to prepare them. The overall goal is to prepare students for college and conservatory auditions for, you know, conservatories or schools of music. So if you're coming to us at grade 12 and you know you're self-taught and you've only taken lessons for a year, then we won't have enough time to prepare. And you tell us you want to go to like even UCLA and prepare those auditions, we won't have enough time to get you to that level at that time. So 10th grade is the cutoff for the audition process, but that's the kids that we serve. And over time, since 1993, you know, originally it was called the Black Talent Development Program because that was the first, you know, underrepresented group that we focused on. Right. As we started going 10 years later after that, in 2003, we expanded to more areas across Metro Atlanta, originally starting in just Atlanta Public Schools, then to Fulton County, which is where Atlanta is housed, in DeKalb County, and then, like I said, across Metro Atlanta. But then we also started to grow and support the growing Latino community in the Atlanta metro area as well, as another underrepresented group in the field. So those are the kids that we target in TDP. We currently work with 25 students a year. And each year after we do the auditions based on the number of kids that graduate from the program or decide to withdraw or decide to withdraw, then however many spots we have at that point is what we're looking to fill. So right now, this year, we have candidates that are looking to fill 5 spots in our program to get us back to 25.
And that's the 5th grade through 10th grade that the auditioning. Okay, so interesting. So are these students also involved in the Youth Symphony program of Atlanta?
So yes and no. So for a lot of these students, the reason why they come to TDP overall is the general consensus is I want to be a better musician on my instrument. So, but a lot of times they may not have had lessons at all. Right. They may be only in band or orchestra in their schools and may not be aware of the local youth orchestras across Atlanta, or if they are, they may not be ready to or to go and, do those auditions.
Right.
Once they come into TDP, we start to work with them and pair them with a teacher that can help them get ready. It's pretty much a pre-college program. So a lot of what they do in TDP is a lot of what's echoed by the time they get to college or conservatory. So when they come to us, by the time they are in their junior year, they have to have at least auditioned for a spot in the Atlanta Youth Symphony Orchestra, only to the fact that, like I said before, that was one of the earlier goals of the program, to make sure that more Black students at the time were successfully auditioning into ASYO. And that's something that we still consider and keep up with going forward. So each year, a significant amount of our students in TDP are represented in the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra as well.
Gotcha.
So with that in mind, what would you say if I don't know how much direct interaction you've had with the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra, what percentage of the youth orchestra is made up of people of color?
I would probably say, and it's kind of weird now because due to COVID, we actually have multiple ensembles. So normally before COVID times, the youth orchestra would be one large ensemble of about 100 to 102 students.
Wow.
And I would say probably 10% of that would be made up of students of color. And this is, this is solely African-American and Latinx students. So between 5% to 10% at the highest since I've been around is what I've noticed for TDP representation or students of color representation in ASYO, because there are students that have been in ASYO that aren't in TDP.
Right.
This time around, since we have 4 ensembles, because we can only have, no more than 30 to 40 students on stage at a time with social distancing requirements, it's nearly the same, but there's a student in TDP, I think, represented in all but one of our groups in our smallest chamber winds group currently. So, but generally in a normal format, about 10, anywhere upwards to 10%.
So, yeah. So, okay, interesting. Which is, that's still, and I think this is what you've said multiple times, it's still like a big effort for you all. It's right at the forefront of your minds, because looking at probably the population of Atlanta, that is not comparable between, the population of the Youth Symphony and the population of Atlanta. And we pointed out, we definitely see that here in Canton. Our Youth Symphony is almost exclusively white students, with this year a single African-American student and a few students of the Asian and South Asian community. And so what are the audition requirements for TDP? Because it sounds like those audition requirements or what are required of those students is a very different set of criteria than what would be expected of someone auditioning for a youth symphony.
Exactly. So TDP audition requirements are very unique, obviously, just in the fact that we're trying to work with students that may not have any prior knowledge of, classical music or even the classical orchestra side. Right. So the standards that we have is broken down based on their instrument and their grade level, and that's just the scales. So if you're a 5th grade trumpet player, that we'll ask you to perform these scales for the first round of auditions. For the solo repertoire, just because we know certain students may not have had private lessons consistently or are self-taught or may not have had lessons at all, they get to choose their own repertoire. And we usually tell them, pick the piece that you feel that you can really demonstrate your musicality for our musician panel that's listening to you. So we don't have any screened auditions for in-person, because we already know who we're trying to bring into the program, and it's to help with their individual growth. But the main standard thing is the set of scales based on your grade level and your instrument, and picking a piece, as long as it's not like, the 3rd flute part from your band class, that won't work. But, come with a good flute etude, a solo, the levels vary from student to student each year.
Right. And is there also financial help? I think we have a question about this later, about how this is funded and how it all works from that angle. But I'm interested to see if your target audience is just students of color, if you're also trying to maybe give this opportunity to students who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford lessons to begin with.
Right. So generally, like say if you had a student that wanted to audition for a TDP, the application is $10. With that $10, as they go through the audition process, TDP will cover the cost for the musicians who sit and listen to them. If they advance to the next rounds and they'll be paired with a teacher to take trial lessons, TDP covers those costs as well. They cover the cost to have the musicians there for the final audition process. And for all the students who are currently in the program, TDP covers the cost for their weekly private lessons.
Wow.
So that is the biggest resource that we afford our students in these communities. Like I said before, because even for me, a lot of these students, their private teacher, quote unquote, is their band or orchestra teacher in school. And when they go home, like a lot of times I did, they're on their own. Unless they, ask their teacher to go help them with their band music afterwards, and the teacher is willing to stay there, which a lot of good music teachers are, which I don't think I was prepared for, which is why I left education. That's how they get to that point. And just being able to afford lessons with a lot of our families. Our program is not need-based, so it's not dependent on how much income a family makes. Anybody, as long as you fit the criteria on who we serve and for our program, anybody is open to doing the auditions. But like I said, the biggest that we do is we cover the cost for the musicians, and we also help cover costs towards tuition for summer music programs, so they can help continue their training once youth orchestra is done and the season is done and school is out, so they're no longer in band or orchestra. So we want to make sure that they keep up with that training. So we'll put funds, they have guaranteed funds and scholarship to help go to Brevard, Interlochen, Sewanee, and all of that during the summer. So they'll continue to progress as they come back for next season. So summer camps, private lessons are the biggest costs that will help cover for our students. And then we also will give them opportunities owning to one of the original needs for why this program was created, to help them get to symphony hall so they can actually see the ASO perform. And so a lot of times we will help cover costs for tickets so they and their parents can actually go and enjoy the classical music in symphony hall stage.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So some of these kids start out when they're going into 5th grade with this program. And naturally, just by virtue of that, not everyone is going to end up pursuing music professionally. Now, I speak about this a lot. In the very least, they're going to finish the program being educated consumers of classical music. But what would you say the percentages of the people that complete the program through their senior year that actually do end up going on professionally, or at least to a conservatory or a college of music?
The majority, I can't give the percentage right now off the top of my head, but I will say the majority of our graduates have gone on to do music professionally. We've had a good amount of students that have completed the program and have actually gone on to do well in other occupations also. But that's kind of how we structure the program as well. And I tell parents this students and parents this at the beginning, is like at any point you feel like music is not something that you are as passionate about as you really thought, you'll at least learn basic skills through TDP's requirements to help you succeed in other areas. So you are going to have to be prompt. You're going to have to show up somewhere on time. You're going to have to be prepared when you get there. As my band director in college would say, don't go to class and just be a piece of furniture. Actually be prepared to get through the lessons so you can get a good grade. And so a lot of what we do and how the program is structured is to help give them not just tools to be successful in music, but tools to be, successful functioning adults as they progress. So that you can take, I have to learn this piece of music within a certain time frame, and that can translate to, I have to study for the bar within this time frame so I can be mentally prepared to actually take the test, So it's a lot that we try to afford both the students and the parents, not just musically, of course, that's the main focus, but other ways as well. A sense of community so they can, start to network with future colleagues that they may have in TDP. We try to bring families together as much as possible. Obviously, COVID destroyed that this year, but a sense of community, being able to network, being open to reach out and learn from others, and just have the basic steps that can help them function when they get to college. And this is why we, stray away from saying that the goal of TDP is to diversify American orchestras, because once they graduate from TDP and go to college, we have no control if they change their major. Like, I can't go up to, Juilliard and say, you made this commitment. You can't decide that you want to leave Juilliard and go study technology and do something else. We're not having that, we can't do that. So it's totally up to them. But what we would hope is, one, that they're successful in whatever they do afterwards, and they'll still be listed as an alumnus of our program that we're still proud of. We have doctors that are currently working. We have lawyers that have come through TDP on top of educators. A lot of our students, especially in recent times, are really dedicated to going and performing and taking auditions for major orchestral performances, and we've had some success in that regard as well. So it's really a full scope. We're actually doing an evaluation through our grant funding from the Mellon Foundation, and we're getting a lot of good feedback from our alums and seeing where they're up to, what they've been up to, and what they're doing professionally. And it's been really eye-opening to kind of help see how we can, build upon what the program has already been doing.
Yeah.
And again, the fact that there are doctors and lawyers who are alums, these people are going to probably attend concerts at their local symphony orchestra. And
give back.
If they're doctors and lawyers, they're probably going to donate, and they may even serve on the board. And this, I would say, equally fulfills the mission of the woman you mentioned earlier who founded TDP, who at first had the idea for it, who was on the board of the Atlanta Symphony and wanted to see more people like her on the board and the audience as well.
Still is a life partner through the Atlanta.
Awesome.
She is still very much involved in the program founded.
That is spectacular.
That is so cool.
Absolutely fantastic.
And I think, we know of at least one student who's come through your program that now is at the Cleveland Institute of Music near us, which is, I believe, a trombone player.
Yeah, I don't remember his name, but I have a couple of friends who are at CIM and told me about him. Trombone player who they played an orchestra with and is from Atlanta. So yeah.
Is it Vincent Tapia?
Yeah.
I wish I could
that is
confirm,
the name.
but
I think that's the name. That sounds right.
Vincent was, he's one of my favorite alums just because he was able to adapt when I took over pretty quickly. And so then he ended up going to Cleveland, and we were very, happy with him, and he was able to actually come back and talk. So we're trying to get more representation of TDP in Cleveland, of course, at more other conservatories, but we have a few alums at Cleveland, and so trying to keep that relationship going with their president and their admissions department. So it's great.
We'll take them from there if they want. We'll just make a little triangle here.
Right.
But yeah.
So you talked a lot about the opportunities afforded to the participants of TDP, but a lot of it, private lessons and attending the Atlanta Symphony with their families and things like that. A lot of it is an individual thing. You did mention you do try to get all of these people together so they can get to know each other. Pre-COVID, what were some of the events that you held to bring all of these families and people together?
So before I get into what the program does, like I said, our founder is still very much involved, and a lot of our alumni parents are involved to help the program be successful as well. So a lot of times they'll serve as mentors to current families so they can help nurture and guide them through any struggles that they may have, so they can stay focused and continue their diligent work to getting to the finish line, which is getting accepted into college or conservatory. But they will host a winter, what's the word I'm looking for? Social and a summer social. And that takes place, usually will take place at one of the homes of the current students, a current parent, where, the volunteers who help start the program with Mrs. Hill and Mrs. Grambling, the current students, myself, everybody, the whole TDP family and community is invited. And it's just a way for us to, catch up and enjoy good food, see what our alumni are up to. Our current students can get to know each other better. Our current families can get to know each other better. So those two things happen pre-COVID times, one in the summer, one in the winter. Part of our requirements for the family oriented. It takes a village is what we call family touch points. And those are family meetings. So we have 3 of those in the fall and 3 of those in the spring. And those are where we can all come together, and I'll either lead a session or have a guest artist come and lead a session on different topics in music, and especially those topics that pertain to the students and families that we serve. So I think one of the last big ones that I did that I think got a good response was, what's it like and how to prepare being the only female in a male-dominated section? What's it like if you are the only person of color at summer camp or in youth orchestra, and those type of topics? And of course, on the deeper side, and then of course the general side on, tips on how you can overcome performance anxiety, how you can, set aside your practice schedule more efficiently. So we have those kind of topics as well, where the students can come learn. And then we'll also a lot of times set aside some time we'll split them up into groups where they can actually talk to each other and learn more about each other. Same with the parents. So we have those family touchpoint meetings each year. They are mandatory for the current students and families to go to. So that's another way that we create the community aspect. One of those family touch points actually is a potluck. So it's just everybody comes, to the arts center, they bring their own dish, and I'll try to either invite some of our alums to come back, because that usually takes place in November, where most people will be home for the holidays. And so come back and just talk to everybody and reaffirm what they're doing, so everybody who's currently going through it can kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. So those are the community and family oriented events that we have for TDP.
Yeah, so those sessions about being female in a male dominated section, those are for the full family. Not just okay, very cool.
The students and one parent has to be present for the family touch point, at least.
Yeah, that's very cool. I think that's important, and something that I could definitely take into what we're doing here is getting our families, our parents, more involved with the process of what their students are learning every week when they come into the symphony hall, of getting them more on board, more than just I drop my student off and then I wait until they're done, but actually getting them a little more involved. So I think that's really interesting. I really like that you all do that. I'm interested to know, and I know I'm lucky enough to know Jennifer Bartlement, who is your executive director. She's one of my favorite people in the entire world. I love her very much. But I'm interested to know how TDP fits in with the rest of what happens at ASO, and how TDP has affected what's happening at ASO as an institution.
So a lot of the work that TDP does that I think really, is in line with what the ASO's mission is as an orchestra and an institution, is to really, like I said at the beginning, continue to connect more with the wider Atlanta community, to share the standard classical music side with the city of Atlanta, no matter who lives here, and making sure that they're all welcome. So, when we're planning our season, and just for basic recruitment efforts, and I want to go and I want to say, maybe I can go to the Latin American Association and go to one of their youth day events and have some of our TDP students perform, at their function. I can talk to those parents and students and tell them that, you have a home in the city of Atlanta that you can come to. You can come and see students that look like your child performing these works. You can see them performing works by people from your same nationality, as we're working through, having more diverse programming. And so I think that ties into a lot of what the Atlanta Symphony is ultimately trying to do as they go forward as a major symphony orchestra, especially in a very diverse currently majority Black city of Atlanta. So, just having TDP there, and as a model program that other orchestral organizations are looking at to kind of see how they can, have a bigger hand in their communities, I think works really well between TDP and Atlanta. I mean, at this point, if Atlanta didn't have a program like TDP, being the cradle of the civil rights movement, the founder of the program being, the wife of a civil rights leader, would be kind of impossible for, everybody to kind of take any initiative seriously. So I think, it really helps shape the ASO's overall goal, just being at the bare minimum saying, everybody is welcome in our hall, and we'd like you to come in here. If you're a lover of music, which we know a lot of you are, we welcome you to come and just meet us, and we want to be more involved in, you know, your everyday activities.
Yeah.
So sort of piggybacking off of that, would you say the Atlanta Symphony has been ahead of the curve, the professional ensemble itself, ahead of the curve in programming and performing works by minority composers?
I definitely think Atlanta has done a tremendous job of, you know, being able to have the advantage of being able to work with local composers in Atlanta, and having a program like TDP where we can actually invite our alums back to come on stage and solo with the orchestra or perform with the orchestra as well. We just had one this past fall, one of our prominent alums, Xavier Foley, who's a phenomenal professional bass player, and he actually premiered one of his own compositions with the Atlanta Symphony as well. So, and there's obviously more talks about how we can incorporate more pieces with composers of color. I know a lot more that is coming for this upcoming season, and we're also trickling that down to the Atlanta Symphony Youth Orchestra. They actually are working on a piece by William Grant Still currently. So it's actually the same piece that we did when I was at college, Out of Silence. So, and then of course, more rep for TDP. So I think Atlanta is in a really, really good spot where the average Joe can look at a concert across the board and say, wow, there's more and more representation coming here on their stage in various levels, from the kids to the adults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So I've already mentioned that there's definitely some things that I can learn from y'all's program and implement here. But I mean, we've said this a couple of times. Something we're trying to do here at the Canton Symphony is make what our hall looks like reflect our community, because the Canton community, not as a majority Black as Atlanta is, but definitely a large portion of the Canton City area is Black, and our audience is not, and our youth symphony is not. So what are some orchestras and what are some things that we could learn from looking at your program, and if we're trying to implement something similar in our own communities? What do you think we could learn from you all and take into our own institutions?
You know, it's actually an interesting question, because like I mentioned before, we're actually doing an evaluation on the TDP program, and we're actually getting ready to host a symposium on how orchestral organizations can actually create and fund pathway programs similar to TDP, or the one in Chicago, CMPI, or Nashville's Cello Rondo program, for that to kind of, you know, help, you know, not only help bring the community and their audiences that's reflective of the cities that they serve in, but also to help other students that are from underrepresented backgrounds who have an interest in classical music, to make sure that they, you know, are at the forefront of, you know, getting them out into the professional world. So I think a lot of what other organizations can learn from us is just, you know, what we've been doing for almost 30 years now. You know, who do you want to, what is your target? Who's your target that you want to, you know, take from from one spot to the next? You know, TDP works with African-American and Latinx students. Other organizations, they, you know, will work with Southeast Asian students of that descent. They may work with white families who may be of a certain income that may, like you mentioned before, may not be able to afford lessons. So one, who are you trying to target for your purpose? And two, how are you going to enact that? Who can you reach out to and, you know, share the mission and your idea about that, so they can, you know, hop on board and believe what you're doing, just like Mrs. Hill did with the ASO and other leaders across Atlanta, so they can, you know, see the mission as well. And then, of course, three, how are you going to do that? You know, is it going to be covering the cost of lessons, because you know that the parents may not be able to, because they may be of, you know, working class. A lot of them may be working class families who are just trying to, you know, get through the day like many of us are, and, you know, paying $60 to $100 for one lesson each week may be out of the question for the time. Are you going to help them, you know, how are you going to help them come and enjoy concerts to the hall for that type of thing? Are you going to be able to help connect them to the right people? So it's just a lot of, what we're doing and what we've already been doing in the community, just with, how we help our students going forward and getting them to conservatory level. So I think, like I said, programs like TDP, Nashville, PMA in Philadelphia, Chicago Musical Pathways, Boston Beans program. Now Cleveland has their training program, and the one in Baltimore and DC. I talk with all these program managers on a weekly basis, and we kind of like bounce ideas off each other. But you can definitely look towards any of these organizations and just kind of get an idea of what you think your organization would work best for your organization. Like you just mentioned, Canton has a very different, demographic than Atlanta. And so, what did Atlanta do for the Black population there that you can, reciprocate to the Black population in Canton? Are the students in Canton schools districts, are a lot of them interested in going the classical music route? If yes, then you have a really good lead for that. If not, then maybe you come back and, reevaluate some other areas on what your ultimate goal is for that. So I think those are some tips that you can, some ways and tips that you can look at if you're thinking about, building a program similar to what we're doing at TDP.
Absolutely. And, we should send some of our representatives from Canton down to Atlanta for your symposium when that happens. So
well, it's
definitely
online.
Let us know.
It's virtual this year, but I'll be going. I already have my ticket.
Perfect. Yes.
Don't worry. Definitely. Don't you worry. I'll be there. And this podcast episode will come out afterwards, after the symposium, but I will make sure to update everyone about how it went, I'm sure. I'm very excited. It's on my calendar. But yeah.
So as we finish up today, we are going to ask you the question we ask all of our guests at the end of their episode. This podcast is, of course, called Orchestrating Change. So how do we orchestrate change?
Like I said before, it's really about what you feel is, what you're worth, what you feel like is worth it for this field. I think continuing to just work with young students in general, the way we can orchestrate change in our field is to start young. And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to target a certain group. I think if you target, kids across the board in general, then you'll help orchestrate change by bringing in a new generation of classical music lovers that will at least be in your concert halls, and then will eventually end up on your stage as well. So I think if we can put enough emphasis on how important our work is across the board for everybody, then the changes will continue to come. That way we won't have to worry about, who are we going to market this to? How are we going to continue to get our funding? Because it will be there. You have already, worked and trained the next generation to come, and they understand what's to happen. So I think that would be my answer to that question. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting hearing everyone's answers, and I think the through line is always just exposing more people to classical music, and if we can get our young people on board, I think that's all the better. Yeah.
Well, Ryan Walks, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me. It was really great to be able to speak with you all. I have to come and take a trip to Canton. It's warmer.
Yes.
Please do. We'd love to have you here. Yeah. Ryan Walks, manager of the Talent Development Program at the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra.
Orchestrating Change is a production of the Canton Symphony Orchestra.
Our theme music was composed by Eric Gould and performed by Derek Snyder and Tim Adams.
Our audio engineer is Nathan Maslick.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.